Assalamualaikum and a very good day to Professor Madya, Dr. Haji Muhammad Shanawi and my fellow teammates. My name is Rosita Hana and I am pleased to present our research proposal for the INC530 Nonverbal Communication Group Assignment. Our study explores the effect of perceived appearance-based scrutiny on social anxiety levels in young adults. So today our presentation will present these three core parts. To begin our proposal, we like to illustrate the digital feedback loop that many young adults find themselves. Our introduction is broken down into three stages. First, we have the catalyst, then the internal shift, and finally, we see the consequences. Moving into the background, we need to understand the bridge between everyday social media use and clinical social anxiety disorder, or SAD. While many people feel shy online, our study will focus on the appearance link. We are looking at physical appearance as the specific trigger for clinical risk. The goal of this research is to quantify how much of the social anxiety we see today is actually rooted in this digital fear of being seen and judged. This brings us to the core problem statement. The real issue we've identified in the literature review is the perceived scrutiny. It's important to note that the stressor isn't necessarily being watched, it's the feeling being watched. This results in a cycle of social anxiety characterized by avoidance behavior and a fear of negative evaluation. We are focusing specifically on the 15 to 24 years old demographic because they are at a life stage where identity formation and the need for social belonging are at their peak, making the negative impact of digital scrutiny significantly more damaging than in any other age group. Our study aims to address the urgent need for intervention in this specific demographic. Now that we have established the why behind this study, let's dive into the what and the how. So this slide outlines the roadmap of our research. From the core questions, we will ask to the specific group of people we are focusing on. First, our research question and objective. Essentially, we are looking at three interconnected links. The first one is the scrutiny objectification link. Does feeling watched actually change how we view ourselves as an object? The second is the behavior anxiety link. How do safety behaviors like avoiding social situations fuel the fire of social anxiety? And the prediction link. Can we actually predict how severe a young person's anxiety will be just by looking at how often they feel scrutinized? Next, our research hypothesis. For each of these questions, we have two paths: the null hypothesis and also the alternative hypothesis. Our core prediction is that there is a significant positive relationship between these factors. Finally, the scope of study. The who and where. We are zooming in young adult age 15 to 24. Crucially, when we talk about appearance, we are not just talking about clothes. We are looking at deeply personal features such as weight, skin condition, hair, and facial features. Of course, no research is without its boundaries, and I like to highlight the limitation of this proposal. Our biggest limitation is the sample and generalizability. We specifically chosen to focus on young adults in Klang Valley and Selangor. While Klang Valley and Selangor is an ideal representative of a highly connected, urbanized environment, we have to admit that this data might not reflect the experiences of young person in rural area like Kelantan, Terengganu, or even in East Malaysia. Secondly, our study design, since it's cross-sectional, is a photograph, not a video. So we can see that scrutiny and anxiety are standing together, but we cannot definitely say one pushed the other into the room. And third, we have to account for self-reporting. We are measuring the perception of being watched. Whether someone is actually staring at them or not doesn't change their anxiety level, but we are still relying on their subjective belief. And finally, our scope. To keep this study rigorous and focused, we are looking strictly at appearance. We know that things like money or exam also can cause anxiety. But for this specific research, we are keeping our eyes purely on the psychological impact of physical scrutiny. And now, Daphne will continue for the literature review part.
Thank you, Rosita Hana. So our literature review will go from a broad to until the more deeper. So I will start with next slide. Thank you. Let's move to appearance as non-verbal communication channel. To ground our proposal in a communication studies, we integrated Richmond, McCroskey, and Hickson's framework. This shifts our study from a purely psychological lens to a core non-verbal perspective, reminding us that appearance is the first message we send to anyone. According to Richmond and his colleague, this channel operates through three types of attractiveness: physical, which is our attributes, physical attributes, and social. How do we see someone that we want to be social with? And task attractiveness dictating on who we work with that is capable to perform the task. So when young adults become obsessively preoccupied with these dimensions, it alters their personal body concept, which is how attractive they see themselves. In severe cases, this distorts into an image fixations, a long-term, structurally rigid, and anxiety-inducing preoccupations with one physical image. Crucially, every encounter creates an immediate judgment. This is fueled by the non-verbal messages of body shapes and size, alongside with the strategic pairing of appearance and dress. Through artifacts and accessories like clothing, makeup, individuals attempt active impression management. However, the judgment generated from these cues may or may not be representative of the person actually is. So to prove how high stakes this channel is, McCroskey outlined the profound effects of attractiveness across multiple environments. So first, in educational setting, attractive individuals are perceived as more intelligent. In persuasive settings, they yield higher success rates in changing minds. In interview settings, they secure higher hireability ratings and salary recommendations. In dating and marriage, appearance acts as an ultimate initial filter leading to the matching hypothesis, where we choose our partner who match our own perceived level of attractiveness. This brings us back to our research problems. Young adults are acutely aware of these heavy social biases. When they feel their appearances fail to meet these demanding ideals, their impression management strategies collapse, shifting appearance from a tool for connections into a source of chronic social anxiety. Next, our theoretical framework. So to build rigorous foundations, our proposed study synthesized three major theoretical pillars to track how appearance-based pressures convert into psychological distress. Our first pillar is the tripartite influence model by Thompson and his colleague in 1999, which outlined the three socio-cultural sources driving unachievable beauty standards. First, the main one, the media. As Young and Gurtala established, social media platforms act as an appearance-focused ecosystem where algorithms feed their users altered, filter-heavy digital artifacts. And second, our peers that act as immediate everyday social benchmark. Verbal feedback like teasing or peer likes trigger a rapid appearance self-consciousness. And lastly, parents, especially in a collectivist culture like Malaysia, parental socialization frequently links specific physical presentations with a long-term relationship and career success. This transition into our second pillar, Fredrickson and Roberts in 1997 comes with an objectification theory. While the tripartite model identified the source of pressure, objectification theory details the internal process. It explains a psychological shift from a functional self to an objectified identity. Driven by an evaluative social gaze, young adults adopt a chronic state of body surveillance, treating their physical bodies as public artifacts that must be constantly monitored. And our final pillar is Festinger, in 1954, come up with a social comparison theory which details the psychological consequences. When individuals habitually monitor themselves, they engage in an upward comparisons against an unattainable curated digital ideals. The literature confirms that this perceived gap between the actual self and the ideal self is the primary driver of the body dissatisfaction and social anxiety. In summary, the tripartite model provides the external pressure, objectification theory explain this internal self-monitoring, and self-comparison theory explain the resulting anxiety. Together, this pillar justify every variable we propose to test. Next. So let's look at our conceptual framework, which serve a specific operational blueprint for our study. Moving from the left to the right, across our diagram, we start with the source, initiated by the tripartite model, which is the pressure from peers, media, and parents, feeds directly into our independent variable, which is the perceived appearance-based scrutiny that we will empirically measure with verbal commentary on physical appearance scale, VCPAS. Rather than predicting a simple direct effects, our framework proposed a sequential mediation pathway tracking a psychological and behavioral journey. So we have the first mediator, mental shift, which is when the scrutiny triggers self-objectifications, it is measured by objectified body consciousness scales, OBCS surveillance subscale, where individuals internalize the social gaze. And second, the physical shift. This mindset manifests as nonverbal safety behavior measured by the body image avoiding questionnaire, BIAQ avoidance scale, involving the physical camouflage and social withdrawal. So this defensive hiding ultimately terminates our dependent variable, social appearance anxiety, measured by social appearance anxiety scale, SAAS. Finally, we found that gender is positioned as moderating variable because it's suggesting that the entire chain reaction significantly amplified for female young adults due to the heightened systemic pressures. In summary, our model maps how external pressure from the VCPAS forces a mental shift in OBCS trigger a physical retreat in BIAQ, and that concludes a severe social anxiety in SAAS. Next, let's move into the internalization of scrutiny, body surveillance. In this section, we track the precise moment of external socio-cultural forces cross into the human mind, changing how the young adult view themselves through two distinct phases, the mental shift and the cognitive internals of ideal. Looking at the first column, the mental shift represents a cognitive transition where individuals stop experiencing their body as a functional subject and begin treating themselves purely as an objectified entities defined by external appearance. Operationalized through our first mediator scale, OBCS, this shift manifests body surveillance or chronic monitoring of one physical self. So the literature highlights three critical layers to this shift. The trigger, Nasrin and Farid in 2023 argue that verbal and non-verbal appearance commentary forces young adults into a state of defensive hypervigilance, and that is accelerated by self-objectification. Young, alongside Gurtala and Forduli, demonstrate that social media platforms like Instagram acts as an omnipresent catalyst, trapping viewers in a cycle of self-objectification to maintain a camera-ready digital presence. And lastly, the breakdown. Gao and his colleague point out that this constant self-monitoring erodes the psychological health and continuously decreases self-compassion and replacing self-kindness with harsh, body-focused criticism. And this brings us to the second column, the cognitive internalization of ideals. If the mental shift is the habit of watching oneself, cognitive internalization is the rule book used to judge what is seen, where the socio-cultural beauty standards are adopted as personal benchmark for self-worth. Our synthesized data outline the structural reality of this internalization. The driver. Central to this tripartite model, Jin and his colleague in 2022 indicate that young women specifically equate thinness with success and status, turning weight reduction into a core value necessary to compete for social advantages. And second, vulnerability. According to Chang and his colleague in 2026, utilizing self-discrepancy theory, severe appearance anxiety emerges from the painful and perceived gap between individual actual self and newly internalized ideal self. And lastly, the consequences. As Miglani in 2025 concludes, this internalization acts as a fundamental predecessor that cement chronic body surveillance, forcing young adults to view their own physical bodies through a highly critical lens to the outside world. Now, lastly, the non-verbal behavior responses. Here, in our literature review, we evaluate how internal body surveillance manifests as physical, observable safety behavior. The previous literature categorized this behavior reaction into three distinct nonverbal columns. First, kinesthetic management and body checking. Past research defined this as a repetitive physical mechanism used to verify social anxiety. Bennett and his colleague in 2022 note that body checking involves chronic repetitive inspection of weight and shape, while Jean and his colleague categorized this as a hallmark symptom of individuals suffering from social anxiety. These protective, time-consuming habits, like compulsive mirror checking, ultimately reinforce the very anxiety they intend to suppress. This leads directly to our second column, proxemic avoidance and social distancing. When young adults feel they're unable to manage the impression physically, they adjust their interpersonal space to minimize exposure to the public gaze. Engin and his colleague in 2023 state that severe appearance anxiety acts as an avoidance-based driver for high rates of social withdrawal. Papanu and his colleague as well highlight that individuals develop a powerful desire not to be seen, opting for a minimum physical contact and seeking refuge in online communication to remove themselves from face-to-face environment. And lastly, non-verbal camouflaging. Here, young adults strategically use physical and digital effects as a protective shield to obscure perceived flaw. Physically, this involves using clothing to camouflage the body part and frequently fixing attire or makeup to handle environment feedback. Few researchers argue that tools like filter and Photoshop allows individuals to hide imperfections and protect their objectified self from social disgrace. In summary, this literature demonstrates that whether through kinesthetic checking, proxemic distancing, or artifact camouflaging, this defensive safety behavior actually created a maladaptive loop that perpetuates the chronic social appearance anxiety and loneliness. Thank you. Now I will invite Shaz to elaborate more on the social appearance anxiety.
I will now explain the psychological outcome of perceived appearance-based scrutiny, which is known as social appearance anxiety. This slide begins with differentiating between general social anxiety and social appearance anxiety, or SAA. General social anxiety refers to the fear of being judged by others in social situations. However, social appearance anxiety is more specific because it is focused on the fear of negative evaluation based on physical appearance, such as body shape, weight, height, or facial features. When individuals constantly feel that their appearance is being judged, they begin to develop behavioral manifestation. High social appearance anxiety drives unique safety behavior. These includes excessive makeup use, frequently fixing clothes, body monitoring, and continuously checking their appearance before social interactions. These behaviors are used to reduce the fear of embarrassment or rejection. This experience is further explained through self-discrepancy theory by Huygens in 1987. The theory states that anxiety occurs when there is a gap between the actual self and the ideal self. Young adults often compare themselves to unrealistic beauty standards shown on social media, which increase self-consciousness and interpersonal sensitivity. As shown in Vickers cycle on the right side of the slide, fear of appearance-based rejection can eventually lead to avoidance of face-to-face interaction, social withdrawal, loneliness, rumination. Over time, this cycle strengthens social anxiety and negatively affect emotional well-being. Moving on to the next slide. This section discusses gender as a demographic moderator. The literature consistently shows that female experience higher level of appearance anxiety compared to males. Males are more associated with muscular ideal, while females are more exposed to societal beauty expectations, especially the teen ideal self. Objectification theory explains that women are more likely to adopt a third-person perspective, where they constantly evaluate themselves based on how others may perceive them. This increases body surveillance or self-consciousness. Furthermore, females are generally more sensitive to interpersonal feedback and social comparisons. High frequency of social media use leads to increased upwards comparisons and body dissatisfaction, strengthening the relationship between appearance scrutiny and social anxiety. Lastly, this slide highlights several important research gaps identified from previous studies. There are significant methodological gaps. Most previous research used cross-sectional and self-report methods, which makes it difficult to establish causal relationships between appearance scrutiny and social anxiety. The literature suggests future studies should move towards longitudinal and experimental designs, as well as include more objective measurements such as screen time tracking, in vivo stresses, and multi-source data collection to reduce bias. Now, secondly, there are demographic and geographical gaps. Existing studies focus heavily on young females participants from Western countries. There is still limited research involving males, non-binary individuals, older adults, and underrepresented groups. In addition, the literature highlighted the lack of studies conducted in Asian contexts, especially in Malaysia, Pakistan, and China. Therefore, this study helped contribute local evidence within the Klang Valley context. Lastly, there are mechanistic and theoretical gaps. Current literature still lacks culturally sensitive psychological theories and deeper understandings of the mechanism behind social appearance anxiety. Researchers also emphasize that need to investigate protective factors such as self-compassion, as well as the impact of specific social media features like filters, edited photos, and appearance-focused content instead of treating social media as one of the general factors. Overall, these gaps justify the importance of this study in providing a more culturally relevant understanding of how perceived appearance-based scrutiny influences social anxiety among young adults. Now I pass over to Mimi Nazira for the next slide.
All right, thank you, Karuzi, Daphne, and Shazi. So I will be presenting on the methodology part. All right. And this study followed a systematic process consisting of 6 main components. And The first is the research design. This study used a quantitative descriptive survey with a cross-sectional approach to examine the relationship among the variables. And second, for the sampling procedure, participants were selected using a non-probability convenience sampling based on the inclusions and exclusions criteria determined by the researcher. Third, the data were gathered through an online questionnaire using the Google form and distributed through social media platform to young adults in Klang Valley and Selangor. Fourth, for the research instrument, several validated psychological skills were used to measure the perceived appearance-based scrutiny, the self-objectification, social avoidance and safety behaviors, as well as social anxiety. And lastly, before that, the collected data were analyzed to understand the relationship among variables and to test the research objective and hypotheses. Lastly, the ethical considerations. Participants were informed about the voluntary participation through informed consent, anonymity, and confidentiality were maintained, and mental health support context. Now, let's move on to the next slide for the research design. The main goal here is to see how appearance pressure and social anxiety are connected. So to do this, we use 4 key features. First, it is quantitative. This means we only collect numbers, not long stories. Numbers let us set to use the statistic to keep the result fair and objective. Second, we use a survey, meaning that every person answers the exact same set of questions. Third, it is cross-sectional. This means we collect all the data at one single time, and it will give us a quick snapshot of what is happening right now. Finally, it is an online questionnaire. So we send it online because it is the fastest and easiest way to reach the young adults. On to the next slide about the population and sampling procedure. Our target population focus on the young adults aged 15 to 24 years old who live in the Klang Valley and Selangor area. And in total, our sample size is 60 respondents, split between 30 males and 30 females. And we have set a strict rules for who could participate. Our inclusion criteria require participants to be between 15 and 24 years old, who live in the Klang Valley and Selangor, and able to understand English. On the other side, our exclusion criteria will be anyone outside the age range and anyone who living outside of the Selangor and Klang Valley area. And this is to guarantee our final numbers match our goals. And also going to the research instruments for the next slide. So to measure the human's emotion accurately, we use the 4 validated psychological skills. The first is VCPAS, which stands for the Verbal Commentary on the Physical Appearance Scale. Participants can rate this on a 5-point Likert scale, ranging from never to very frequently. Second is OBCS, or the Objectified Body Consciousness Scale, and this is focusing specifically on the body surveillance. Participants can use the 8 points Likert scale from strongly agree to not applicable. Third, we have BIAQ for the Body Image Avoidance Questionnaire. Participants we will use the 19 item measures on a 6-point Likert scale from never to always. And finally, we use SAAS, or the Social Appearance Anxiety Scale. This is to measure the person's anxiety and the fear regarding the negative appearance evaluation by other social situations. They can use the 5 Likert scale from not at all to extremely. That's all for my part. I will pass the next slide to Nurbani for further explanations on how each section works.
Okay, for the instrument details, our questionnaire was built using 4 specific tools to measure different things. They all use rating scales, Likert scales, to gauge how often or how strongly participant felt about the certain statements. Number 1, we measured how often people receive verbal comments or criticism about their appearance, VCPAS. And then the second one, we look at how much individual monitor their own bodies from an outsider's perspective, which is OBCS. And the third one, we measured avoidance behavior, like how often someone might skip a social event or constantly check their appearance because of body image concern, which is BIAQ. And finally, we measured the actual anxiety or fear people feels regarding how others evaluate their looks, which is SAAS. Each of these tools was carefully selected to provide a comprehensive understanding of the different facets of body image, consent, and their impact on daily life. By employing these tools, we aim to not only capture the frequency of this experience, but also delve into the intensity of emotion they evoke. The result from our questionnaire will offer valuable insight into how societal pressures and personal perception intertwine to affect individuals. Ultimately, our goal is to use this information to inform intervention that promotes positive body image and mental well-being. By understanding the nuance of these experiences, we hope to contribute to a more accepting and empathic society. We move to the data collection procedure. To collect our data, we will distribute an online questionnaire using the Google form. We specifically targeted young adults living in the Klang Valley. Our process followed by the 6 simple steps, which is, as you can see over there, we identified our target group, ensured the new participant was voluntary, and asked them questions about their demographic and body image experiences. Most importantly, we all made sure that all responses were collected anonymously and handled securely before preparing them for the analysis. Next to the data analysis, once the data collection was complete, we moved to the analysis itself. Based on established research methodology, we extracted all the Google Forms responses and organized them neatly into Microsoft Excel. For this study, Excel was our primary tool. We use it to run descriptive statistics, which simply means we turn the raw data into frequencies, percentage, tables, and the pie chart. This allows us to clearly summarize who our respondents are and easily interpret the findings to answer our study main objective. And then we move on to the ethical consideration. Because we are asking about personal feelings and anxieties, ethics were at the top priority. We focus on the 3 main pillars. Number 1 is inform the consent and voluntary participant, which the participant had to be between 15 to 24 living in Klang Valley or Selangor. They had to give digital consents before starting and knew they could quit at any time without penalty. Second one is the anonymity and confidentiality, whereby we didn't collect a single name, address, or phone number. We only asked for identifiable details like age, district, keeping everything strictly confidential. And the last one is we're gonna protect the data from the harm. Since this topic can sometimes cause distress, we embedded support resources directly to the survey. Before we submitting, the participant will provide the free confidentiality mental helpline like Talian Hill and Best Friend Kuala Lumpur. And that's all for me. Thank you everyone for watching, and thank you, Professor Sean.